Welcome back. So in the previous video, I said that the alpha channel is the same thing as a mask, so it will show up in the channels. Well, what am I talking about? I remember how I said a pixel is a picture element and that there's the physical aspect, such as the screen that you're seeing, and the informational aspect, the digital aspect, which is just the data that we're using to recreate it. Well, while each channel has a certain number of bits, in this case, the red and the green and the blue channel each have 256 values, which is represented by 8 bits of data on each one. There's one other piece that comes along with each pixel, which is the opacity, or transparency, depending on which way you want to say it. You should be somewhat familiar with transparency or opacity. Same deal. For example, remember I have 2 layers here going on. I have another one that I may not want at all, but we'll stick around with that for now. If I were to go over to my opacity and I were to just drop it down, you can see halfway through. In other words, 50% of this white is now showing up and 50% of this color below it is showing up. But this can happen on a pixel by pixel basis. You may remember your masks from your previous class, but let's talk about it again in case it's been a little bit. If you were to just click on this icon in the layers palette while you have a layer selected, you will have access to the layer mask. We'll add a layer mask. If you don't have a selection, nothing in particular seems to change. You get a new icon next to your preview thumbnail. But in channels, you now have something called layer mask 1. You notice that these are the same icon, the same thumbnail, a white square. If we were to click on the thumbnail of the layer, this gives us back our color. Notice if I click on the thumbnail on the mask, we suddenly lose our color. We have black and white. And it changes in the channels. So watch the channels palette for a second. Click on the mask, I get the layer 1 mask active. Click on the thumbnail of the layer, I get the composite RGB active instead. This is showing you what you're editing. Notice also in the properties palette, we have all kinds of phenomenal tools for doing mask adjustments. Color range, invert, all that good stuff. We'll talk about that in a minute too. First, how is this working and what did I mean by if you don't have a selection? Let's roll back for a second. If I grab the thumbnail of the mask and I drag it down to the trash can, that will ask me if I want to apply the layer mask before removing, and I don't want to do that. I just want to delete in this case. Boom, it's gone. I'm going to make a selection. And I'm going to press the mask, add layer mask. Boom. Everything I had selected is still here. Everything else appears to be erased, except it's not really erased. The data is still available to us. In other words, the image is still there. If we take a look at this mask again, notice in the thumbnail we have a white blob and black. What's going on there? If we were to get our brush tool, remember how I said that the color disappeared? If we were to select a beautiful blue, I get a gray instead because I have the mask selected. If I come back over here, I've got a beautiful blue. I can get a beautiful anything I want, but it's not going to translate when I click over here. This is in black and white only because it's literally only one channel. And while it has 0 black to 255 white and all of the grays in between available to it, it isn't a composite, so we don't have a lot of colors. So that's a lot of information. What does all that really mean to us as artists? It means that we can bring things back in or out. So with solid white, I can activate the mask. Notice the mask is selected. I can paint back in the stuff below it. Great. If I have black, just going to flip this over so it's black. I can clear away the pixels. Now this is in many ways better than erasing because I can retrieve things. So if you want to do something non-destructively, which you're going to want to do a lot in this class so you can retrieve things, masks are great for that. Now it also has the ability to do semi-transparent. And that's easy enough by bringing up our color selector again. Let's just go for about a 50% brightness, and we'll see 50% of the stuff coming through. Notice that that paint is overriding the white or the black on it. How do we see this, though? How do we see what's going on? What if we want to take a closer look? If you press the Alt key, press and hold the Alt key, and then click the thumbnail, we can see what's going on. Now, what did that do? That was the shortcut in the channels palette to turn on the eyeball, the visibility, on the mask. So now we can actually take a look at what's happening. If I were to take the magnifying glass, the zoom tool, and drag in, look at that. Starting to make a little more sense. What's happening here, the secret is this. I'm going to click on a standard thumbnail. It'll take us back to the composite view. What's happening is that, as they say, white reveals, black conceals for your layer masks. In other words, when you have the white paint show up on your mask, you will be able to see certain things. You'll be able to see whatever the layer has. I'm going to alt-click again to get there. And if you have black, it will hide it. And anything in between will have a different value. So I could, for example, select my mask, activate my mask, take the gradient tool again, set it to black and white. D on your keyboard is for default colors, so that will give you white and black. X will flip those around, just a heads up. So I'm going to do that a lot throughout the semester. Drag. Oh, look at that. We have a gradated transparency effect. How great is that? That's really cool. We can do a lot with that. But there's more. A mask and a selection are similar data. In fact, they're close enough that people will say that they're the same things. If you save a selection, it will store in your channel's palette as a saved selection. Do you guys remember that you can do that? For example, I just had a marqueed circle, and then I shifted to add a couple of new circles on things. I wanted to save this beautiful selection for later. Under the select menu, I can actually save my selection or load old section. So if I save it, I get to name it. Notice that it says channel, and this is the document. This is Untitled 1. I still haven't named this. I'm going to call this demo selection. Look at that. Let me deselect, Control D on the keyboard. Look at that. There's a new channel. That's what they mean when they say, and you're going to hear this on YouTube from time to time or read it in the Adobe documents, masks and selections are the same thing. It's just data. It's just data stored in the channels, and it can be reloaded appropriately. So that means you can also get a mask back in. So for example, we had a slightly more complicated mask, some white, some black, just using X on the keyboard to toggle between them. Slightly more complicated mask showing these brilliant colors below the little RGB. I can load this in as a selection if I were to control click on the layer. Now I'm saying control, I'm saying alt. If you're on a Macintosh, please note that control is the same thing as command, alt is the same thing as option. More and more people are using PCs with Adobe these days, so I'm going to stick with the control and alt. Just in your head, translate that to control is command, alt is option. You'll be absolutely fine. So now I have this selection. Now I can do it the other way. I can select, and if I were to say get rid of this original mask, boom, delete. And I load in this selection instead. Now remember what happened way back at the beginning of this video. When I pressed the Add Mask button, everything that was selected was saved, and everything that was not selected was removed. Boom. Exactly what we expected. I'm going to go back in history. Sometimes, though, you want to select what you want to mask out. And in that case, you can do a whole bunch of different things. If you just have the mask, if you go to your mask layer, and again, if I alt-click on it, option-click for the Macintosh, I can see everything. I can invert anything that I want to invert through Control-I, which is the same thing as image, adjustments, invert, which means that it's going to change how the mask is working. Now it's just getting things off. So I can select that. I have the mask thumbnail active, not my layer thumbnail. You can see that reflected in the channels. I've got the layer 1 mask. Control-I, invert. Oh, look at that. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it, and I'm just going to fill this entire thing with white. Control-delete, since white's my background color right now. Boom. So the mask is revealing everything. The other way to do it, sorry, if we don't have a mask, I don't know why I filled it. I should just delete it. There we go. The other way to do it is if you're selecting things that you intend to mask out instead of things that you intend to save. The brilliant engineers at Adobe realize that people want to do that a lot. Hold down the Alt key when you press the Add Layer Mask button. Boom. And it masks out that stuff. In other words, if I alt-click on the layer again so that we're looking at the layer mask, it's the inverse of what I had selected. It just filled it with black when it created that mask. I think that that's great. It's something that people forget a lot, but you can absolutely alt-click on the layer mask to create new masks. Now, all of these were dependent on the layers palette. It is possible to work with masks as well inside of the menu up at the top of the screen. And you'll notice that we have a layer mask and hello, there we go. We have a layer mask and we can delete it. We can apply it. We can create a new one if there's not a layer mask on something. So if we come to this white blob that I painted way earlier and I went up to layer mask, I could hide all or reveal all. And if I had a selection and I went up to layer mask, I could hide selection or reveal selection. That, in a lot of ways, is more intuitive than alt-clicking or not alt-clicking. So if you don't want to think about it too much, you can use the layer mask. I just prefer the buttons because I always have my layer palette open, so it's easy for me to get to. There are a few other kinds of masks as well. Vector masks, which we're not going to discuss too much right now. We're going to deal with this in a later assignment, so don't worry about that. Clipping masks, this is a good thing to cover. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And also this button right here, which is the edit in quick mask mode. And let's talk about all those in a new video because there's quite a bit to talk about. So I'll see you in just a minute.